Greetings out there, all of you funketeers and soulful people. The reason that it's taken a long time for me to do my latest funk and soul volume of vinyl is because when I was looking through a lot of my vinyl records related to that I haven't done in the past, there were literally dozens upon dozens of them covering the 1970s and the 1980s. And it seems like at least 2 or 3 dozen for the 80s alone. So I decided to break the 80s in funk and soul up a little bit. And this volume of 25 records you see here is going to cover the years from 1980 to 1983. 1984 is going to have to be at another time, and I'm going to cover that probably with the rest of the 80s in another volume. But we're going to start out with this dude. I want to thank my friend in the Ukraine, Andrew Osterov, for introducing me to his music. Rocky Robbins, you know, he came out of Minneapolis, but you know, I have a feeling that he was just eclipsed in the early 80s by Prince, R.I.P. Prince, you know, just coming up in the world. I get him, and I like his jacket though, with the records on it and the needle. But superficiality aside, this album, he had Larry Graham playing bass on it. He had Eddie Bongo Brown. He had Louis Satterfield from the Phoenix Horns. Don Myrick. You know, he had a little bit of Earth, Wind and Fire, a little bit of Graham Central Station on this album. It's on the A&M label from 1980. Great, I would say, funky soul album, more or less. Ashford and Simpson, A Musical Affair. This was their first album of the 80s. Very much in their disco period of the time. But, you know, I'll tell you something about Ashford and Simpson. You know, when you get an Ashford and Simpson record, whatever they're doing, it's always the best arranged and the best quality. And there's Nick and Val. R.I.P. Nick Ashford. Sorry to see you go. Several years ago. Smokey. We're back at Motown here, you know, the old home of Ashford and Simpson. This is his 1980 album, Warm Thoughts. When I had the Smokey Robinson Greatest Hits on CD, the first cut on here, Let Me Be the Clock, was on this album. But there's a great song on this album that I love called Melody Man, which was written with Stevie Wonder. And, you know, Stevie Wonder also wrote Let's Get Serious for Jermaine Jackson. Smokey Robinson looks a little bit like Kenny Rogers there, but, you know, I just saw a special on him live from the White House. He really is one of the, you know, greatest songwriters. I don't blame Bob Dylan for calling this guy one of the greatest poets, you know. Sonny Burke, Marv Tarplin, great musicians have also moved through him, through his bands and through his backup people. Great album from Smokey. Stacey Lattisaw. She was a teen star, of course, in the early 80s, and this is her 1980 album, I believe her third, Let Me Be Your Angel. I think Stacey's doing gospel music now, the last time I heard. It's a regular Cotillion label. This album was one that I avoided getting for years because I had the Rick James Greatest Hits from the 90s, actually the same series as the Smokey Robinson one, the Ultimate Collection, and it had a lot of songs from this album on it, but I wanted to get it in its entirety, so I did. This is Rick James's classic album, you know. All you out there who are really into funk, especially from the early 80s, you know this image and this album by heart. It starts out with Give It To Me Baby, which is, to me, and Henrique, you know, shout out to Henrique again, always shout him out in these videos, is one of Rick James's all-time funk smashes, and you know, it was a huge hit for him. This also has a really great reggae number that could be about what's been happening to, you know, Trayvon Martin and Freddie Gray in more recent years. Mr. Policeman. It's like Mr. Policeman is getting Rick on the back too. Rick had his way of being topical. Sometimes his lyrics could be a little inane even for me, but another great track on here is Ghetto Life. And then he's got Below the Funk, Past the J. Amazing stuff. And Super Freak, of course, is on here. We all know that one. And Fire and Desire with Tina Marie. The energy of he and Lady T are meeting somewhere. Call it the afterworld, call it heaven, call it the unseen earth, whatever. They're meeting there. There's going to be a lot of fire and desire happening. That energy. Denise Williams, My Melody. I passed this album up a lot, but I actually found this in a dollar bin. So I finally got it. It's a good album, very, very ballad oriented, but Tom Bell, he is just, even in the 80s, he's so amazing with that. Since she's deeply involved in the Philly scene, Tom Bell was a natural to work with her. There's just some lyric shoots and stuff. It's on the ARC Columbia. Now, I just got this album very recently. This is actually a flea market thing. Kid Creole and the Coconuts. Fresh Fruit in Foreign Places. This is actually their second album. This is a very hard album for me to describe personally. It's basically, from what I understand, it is a concept album with a Caribbean version of Homer's Odyssey. In this case, the subject is With a Girl Like Mimi. Mimi is the subject of this album, the search for her. The concept is kind of complicated. It plays out on the back here. I believe this is actually a stage show they presented. Kid Creole and the Coconuts are not that well known. They're sort of a Caribbean big band funk hybrid, if you could imagine that, equivalent to what P-Funk were doing at the time. Really conceptualizing their music. I just think, August Darnell and Andy Hernandez, Cody Mundy are just amazing in what they do with the band on this album. Any Kid Creole album. We'll be seeing them again in a minute. Peabo Bryson, I Am Love, and that is not the Jackson 5 song from the 70s. It's a great up-tempo song called Move Your Body. You think of him as doing big ballad stuff, but he really knew how to work the up-tempo music, too. This is also from 1981 on the EMI label. Angela Bofill, Something About You. I believe this is her third album. She's getting hardcore into the boogie on this album, into the boogie funk. Narada Michael Walden produced this. Really amazing album. I can't say there's any bad tracks on here. I've become a big fan of her vinyl. There's a lavender lyric sheet. She's gone now, unfortunately. R.I.P. Angela. And more Denise Williams. Another one you're going to be seeing a lot of in this video. Niecy. From 1982 is when this album was made. Also on ARC. Tom Bell also produced this album. Somewhat similar to My Melody. Maybe a couple more tad-up tempo tunes on it, though. Billy Ocean, Inner Feelings. For any of you who know him for his pop-oriented material with Caribbean Queen, you should hear how this man conceptualized himself in 1982. He had his breakthrough album in 1981, Nights Feel Like Getting Down. This was actually featured a song that I love called Calypso Funkin'. This guy was a serious disco funk guy in those days. Very serious boogie funk artist. Again, I'm going to say it, dollar bin find. It's very significant because I never expected to find this at all. If you think you know Billy Ocean, check this out, especially if you love boogie and you love funk. Aura, spin-off of Slave. Steve Washington. They actually put on the back of their album their two previous records. This is from 1982 now. I don't know if I've shown the Salsoul label. I don't think I have. There's Salsoul. I've heard their music generally described as the fake Philly sound, but, you know, Aura definitely had their own thing, especially as a Slave spin-off group. Stephanie Mills. She's an artist I get into a lot on vinyl. I have the Funk Essentials best of her with a lot of extended mixes. But, you know, this album has one of my favorite songs by her on it. Sorry for those two slip-ups. Pilot Error. There's even a great video to it that really conceptualizes it in a very witty way on YouTube. You should go check it out. Casablanca label. Says Stephanie Mills Fan Club. Back to Rick James again. Presents Bobby M. That is the saxophone player Bobby Militello. He is a big bearded guy, sax player who used to play with Dave Brubeck. I think during the 60s at some point. This does not sound like Dave Brubeck. This sounds much more like Rick James. My favorite songs on this are Alto Man and the title track of this album. Lenny White actually helped produce this. They also do a cover of Let's Stay Together. This is on the Gordy imprint on Motown. I think I've probably shown you that. Now this man. This is a promotional album, property of Capitol Records. It says in gold on the top. I did not know who this man was. He looked very familiar, and he did a cover of Sly and the Family Stone's If You Want Me to Stay on it. And I thought, my goodness, you know, he's got George Duke, Billy Preston, Patrice Rushen, James, and Philip Ingram. Why is all these people on his records? Well, he's on EMI, and it shouldn't have surprised me. Moses Tyson Jr. is the cousin of Sly Stone, and he is now a gospel musician. If you look at his Wikipedia page, there is absolutely no acknowledgement of this 1982 album whatsoever. This is full-on soul funk, folks. This is not no gospel here. But this was his first album, Do You Want It? Great history on this album, and very surprised I found it. What it was. The Spinners, Grand Slam. I'll tell you something about the Spinners. It's a great documentary you should check out on them on YouTube too. I believe it's Unsung or whatever. Or check it out somewhere. But the Spinners, you know, even if they didn't have a lot of big hits, their albums were always consistent. Especially with their lead singer, John Edwards here. There's some seemingly disembodied Spinners heads. Looks like a poster out of the 60s almost, only a little different. They actually do a cover of Funny How Time Slips Away by Willie Nelson on here. Leon Ndugu Chancellor plays drums on a lot of these songs. And for the most part, you know, and Paulinho DaCosta's on percussion, this is a hardcore funk album. The Spinners can basically do anything, you know. Again from 82. Dionne Warwick, Friends in Love. This is produced by Jay Graydon. She has a couple duets with Johnny Mathis. This particular album came out around the same time as her album with the Bee Gees, Heartbreak. Great urban contemporary soul album. A little up-tempo, a little jazz, a little pop. You know, not bad Dionne from the era. Here we are back to Kid Creole again. From what I understand, this album was titled Tropical Gangsters in most areas of the world, but the American version is called Wise Guy. And this actually continues the whole Mimi cycle. I think that's probably August Darnell holding Mimi on the cover. I would have loved to have seen that stage show. There's Cody Mundy in the top. This had a song called Annie, I'm Not Your Daddy on it. This is on the Sire record label. I don't know if I've shown you the Sire record label. There's an inside jacket. If you have any Talking Heads or Madonna records from this era, you've probably seen that label and the ZE on the side. This was a tremendous find for me. You know, being as big a, you know, Chic Organization fan as I am, to find Bernard Edwards' one and only solo album, Glad to Be Here. It almost looks like the cover was a cutaway scene from the Animaniacs. The Flamin' Groovies did a cover like that too. There's Nard. This is an amazing album. You know, I really love all the tracks on this. Really, if you love Chic, you'll love this album. It just has that Chic vibe to it. From 1983 on Atlantic Records. And here we are again with Denise Williams, I'm So Proud, from 1983. Looking pretty in pink there, isn't she? And this album has a promo pack, which I have often called in my video goodies. You know, even the guy I bought this from, Bob, up at the Record Connection in Waterville, Maine. Hey Bob, if you're seeing this, he loved the name Goodies. It feels like goodies. There's promo information, and there's more. Really nice looking promo photo of Denise. Always remember, if you're looking for a promo photo, look for the logo. It even has an address for the fan club information on it. That's important. And aside from the promo packs, goodie stuff, there's a lyric sheet. Again, a lot of pink on this album. Teddy Pendergrass. This album has some history. This is one of two albums. I have the other one on a double CD of his. Heaven Only Knows from 1983. It was patched together from some unreleased stuff from the late 70s and early 80s that was kind of jazzed up by some of the Philly people while Teddy was recuperating from the car accident that he had that paralyzed him from the neck down, and they weren't sure if he was ever going to be able to come back, and luckily he did for a little while. This is an amazing album. It's got some great Teddy Pendergrass ballads, and it also has some great up-tempo tunes. You know, Teddy's just amazing on this album. I know they probably jazz it up with some modern synthesizers. It was probably stuff from the late 70s and early 80s. But they really did a good job with putting this album together. June Pointer, Baby Sister. The one thing I always appreciated about the Pointer Sisters is when they went solo, they did not break up. They would go off and do solo records. They might have a little success, and then they'd come back and be incredible together in the 80s. Now, the only one who actually did leave was Bonnie, and there's a big story behind that, too. And, you know, June had her troubles, R.I.P. June Pointer. She's been dead for a while now. The song I knew from this album was I'm Ready for Love, which was kind of a girl group song. But the rest of this, I'll tell you something. If you like the Pointer Sisters album, So Excited, with songs like If You Ever Get Back Your Lady, and you know, songs with somewhat of a funkier, jazzier edge, you'll love this album. It came out roughly around the same time as their album Breakout. It's not as electronic, but, you know, I'll show you the label. You know, it's funny, whenever I see the Planet label, I always think Pointer Sisters. I know there were other acts on it, but Planet was always a Pointers label. Richard Perry. This may have been in an old vinyl collection video I did years ago, but I just had to include this again because I actually got this album from eBay. This is Cameo's album Style. I don't believe it's been reissued in this country on CD, and very rarely outside of it. This is kind of a transitional album. They had a record in '82 called Alligator Woman, which had Vanity on it from, you know, Vanity 6. And there's the four-person lineup of Cameo. The band had kind of pared down by this point a little bit. This is still very stripped down early 80s Cameo, but, you know, they're transitioning kind of from what they did on Shake Your Pants into what would happen on Candy, She's Strange, and Word Up. It's a transitional album between that, but you just know it's Cameo when you listen to it. It's got the Atlanta Artist label, of course. Natalie Cole, I'm Ready. I want to give a shout out to Henry Cooper, good friend, trumpet player of mine from Marietta, Georgia, who really hit me to a lot of great Natalie Cole stuff. This is an amazing example of Natalie Cole doing boogie funk in the 80s. You know, Marvin Yancey and Chuck Jackson were still involved. Stanley Clarke did some music on this album. This is straight up boogie funk. Straight up boogie funk. And even though Natalie was in recovery from drugs at that time, you know, she really gave this her all. I think it's actually one of her stronger albums of the early 80s. R.I.P. Natalie. I always miss you. Back to Rick James again. Cold-blooded. Sorry, doing a very bad Dave Chappelle. You know, here's Rick. His Donna Summer poodle cut. Looks a lot like Donna Summer on that cover, I gotta say. Except that wilder tiger stripe. And the reason why these neon pyramids are behind him, and they're behind him in this picture too, you can find this on the Rick James Greatest Hits 2, is because of a concept he had for this album. Unity. This is our symbol of unity. This is the symbol of brotherhood and sisterhood on the planet Earth, and there's a lot more. And apparently that was a pendant you were supposed to cut out. I just listened to this album not too long ago. A lot of people think this album is really not Rick James' strongest, but I'm going to tell you, I mean, he has Pimp the Simp with Grandmaster Flash, which is a great anti-prostitution song. You bring the funk out, great funk numbers, and of course the title, New York Town, and of course the title song, which is really, really a good example of, you know, Rick doing it to death as a multi-instrumentalist without utilizing the Stone City Band so much. So here's 25 examples of my funk and soul music from the early part of the 80s. The next part of the 80s is coming right up, but I just wanted to show you these while I could. There's a lot of information I had on this album. This is going to be a relatively long video, but I hope that you enjoyed it, and keep listening to your music, and if you're funky, be proud. Peace.